Thank you for inviting me to speak here at the conference today. My name is Christy Burden. I'm a consultant obstetrician and associate professor at the University of Bristol, and I'm going to talk to you about the partner trial that's currently underway. I'm the co-CI for the partner trial alongside Professor Andy Judge, who's also based at the University of Bristol. So why are we undertaking this research and doing this study? Well, as we're all aware, the rate of adverse pregnancy outcomes such as pre-eclampsia, stillbirth and preterm birth is still too high in the UK, and these rates can vary between hospitals. We all know there's many reasons for these, but there are current challenges with the way we undertake risk assessment currently in pregnancy. And firstly, it's hard to identify who is at most risk of adverse pregnancy outcomes early enough in pregnancy to implement any meaningful intervention. And second, we know that risk assessments often rely on previous poor pregnancy outcomes, meaning that some families only get specialist care after complications occur in subsequent pregnancies. And lastly, we know that NHS maternity teams are increasingly facing more pressures and challenges and have to keep up with the latest guidance and best practice care. So looking now more specifically at pregnancy risk assessment for pre-eclampsia. So currently we use a 6-year-old unvalidated checklist approach. And there are a number of challenges with this. We know there's a high false positive rate with the checklist approach. We know the interaction of the risk factors within the checklist are not taken into account. And we know that these risk factors are not equivalent. And we also know that with the checklist approach, we are pushed into using arbitrary thresholds for continuous variables. And importantly, social deprivation and ethnicity aren't included in this checklist approach. And overall, at the end of the risk assessment, no numerical risk is provided. So what's the intervention in the partner trial? So the Tommy's Clinical Decision Tool was developed by the Tommy's National Centre for Maternity Improvement. And this intervention aims to improve care and outcomes in 2 ways. It improves risk assessment and prediction by replacing checklists with more accurate prediction algorithms. And depending on the risk allocated, recommends best practice care. This more accurate assessment on who's at risk of placental dysfunction, preeclampsia and preterm birth means that women who are high risk get the care they need, and it provides a personal care pathway for each woman. It also provides immediate clinical decision and best practice care and support for healthcare professionals and staff. So looking now at the evidence already out there and looking at the effectiveness of first trimester combined screening. So this is looking at the use of one of the algorithms of placental dysfunction and preeclampsia. It's been evaluated in a maternity unit, and this was shown to reduce the rates of preeclampsia, reduce the rates of SGA, and reduce the overall perinatal death rate. Interestingly, the reduction in perinatal death rate was seen to be greater in the non-white population, showing that this intervention has the potential to reduce ethnic health disparities. So looking more closely at actually what is the tool and what's in the tool. So it actually has 5 touch points or risk assessments, 2 early on in pregnancy, so a placental function assessment and a preterm birth assessment that all women have, and 3 later on in pregnancy that some women have. So a possible preterm labour assessment, change in fetal movements and timing of birth assessment. So at each touch point, data is entered into the assessment, and this includes maternal characteristics, obstetric or medical history. And what's really different from the traditional checklist is it also includes clinical or ultrasonography measures. So looking at the preterm birth assessment, so this is looking at the risk of preterm birth less than 34 weeks. So in this assessment, the factors that go into that are demographics, medical history and obstetric history. And from that, there is a numerical risk assessment for the chance of preterm birth. And depending on the risk assessment and the risk that's allocated, a woman will be allocated best practice care. So that could be either if they're low chance of preterm birth, standard care, moderate chance, scheduling a cervical length between 18 and 21 weeks, and high chance of preterm birth, referral to the preterm birth service. So looking now at the placental function assessment, and this is looking at the risk of preeclampsia resulting in birth less than 37 weeks gestation. So with this assessment, the factors included are maternal characteristics, ultrasound measures of CRL or head circumference, standardised blood pressure, PAP-A, and uterine first trimester Dopplers. And again, there is a numerical risk of placental dysfunction, and from that there is a recommended care pathway. And this can be recommendations for aspirin, a scan schedule, and later on in pregnancy, a timing of birth assessment. So before undertaking the partner trial, the Tommy's Clinical Decision Tool was implemented in 4 early adopter sites, and the aim of this was really to get feedback from women and from staff about the usability and acceptability of the tool. And we got a lot of really useful data that helped us improve the tool. So the tool has a side that's visible to healthcare professionals and also a side that's visible to women and birthing people. And a lot of the data from the early adopter sites has really helped to improve the usability of the tool. Overall as well, women and healthcare professionals found that it was easy to use. And importantly, we also looked at the women who were registered on the tool compared to the population demographics in the maternity units in the early adopter sites, and we found this was similar. So what we found that there was no digital exclusion seen, and it was equally used across a range of deprivation areas and different ethnicities. So moving on now to the partner trial. So the aim of the partner trial is to evaluate the effect of the implementation of the Tommy's Clinical Decision Tool within the NHS. And our vision and aim of the research is to use technologies to support maternity staff to provide best practice care, reduce inequalities and raise the standard of antenatal care across the UK. And aiming to reduce rates of pre-eclampsia, preterm birth and stillbirth, and support the government in their target to reduce pregnancy adverse outcomes and improve safety in maternity units. So the trial is supported by a wide collaboration of university and colleges and charities across England. So looking now at the trial design, so the trial is a randomised cluster trial. So we are recruiting NHS trusts in England, and the trusts will be randomised 1-to-1 to either the clinical decision support tool or to standard care. So if they're randomised to the intervention and the clinical decision support tool, this will be a whole unit change for the maternity unit, and all women will be risk assessed by the clinical decision support tool. If they're randomised to standard care, they'll currently follow their usual care pathway protocols. So we're collecting data, so looking at clinical outcomes, and this data will be collected from the booking appointment until 28 days after the end of the pregnancy. So our primary objective of the trial is to assess the effectiveness of the clinical decision support tool on reducing the incidence of hypertensive disorders in pregnancy compared with standard care. So looking at our inclusion criteria, so any trust must have an active maternity unit. We're looking at trusts with approximately 3,000 births per annum or greater. We need the trust to have an IT system that we're able to use to extract data on clinical outcomes. And we need a trust to have internet access in clinical areas, including in the community settings. So our primary outcome is hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, including pre-eclampsia and pregnancy-induced hypertension. And we're also looking at a number of secondary outcomes, so a number of maternal and fetal clinical outcomes, and in further work packages looking at implementation and health economic evaluation. So what's our current status? Where are we currently? So we've currently randomised 8 maternity units across England, which is fantastic. 3 have been randomised to intervention and 5 to control. And we've got a few more sites coming on board in the next few weeks. So looking at the spread of the sites that we've recruited, so we do have a good geographical spread across England, both the sites that have been randomised and also the expressions of interest that we've received. So we're always looking for new sites, and we have capacity to take new sites on board. So if you're interested, please do get in touch, either by emailing the partner trial, or if you use the QR code, you can fill in the expression of interest questionnaire. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to be contacted for any queries regarding the partner trial by email. Thank you very much.